Okay, we will just start the class now. Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to the first day of class again. So I see that we have some new students and some old students in here. So let's just get started with the introduction for the new students in here. All right. If you're a new student to this class, can you raise your hand so that I can see who is a new student in here? I can see that Mason, um, Wilton, Rick, you guys are new students, right? Okay, I see that also Ethan, are you also a new student? Oh, okay. All right. So I see that we have about three or two or three new students in this class. That's very, very awesome. Let me just introduce you guys to me, the teacher. So hello everyone. My name is Jimmy, and I'm a 10th grader in Arcadia High School. It's a really, really cool high school. And I also want to like to get into the STEM career, like computer science, bio, chem, or like medical research and that stuff. So yeah, and I'm also an ant keeper. I keep ants and basically as pets, and I basically observe them, what they do. It's pretty fun. And I've been doing this for 5 years since I was 10. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. So I think a lot of you guys already know about this because a lot of you guys are like old students. So yeah, anyways. So to the new students, I would just explain how I usually teach the class. So this is my second time teaching, so I would try my best to help you guys learn more about bio. And to the old students, I have added some new things into my lessons. So that would be something new that you guys will observe in my class. And you guys can ask questions whenever you want to. Just be sure to like raise your hand, like use the raise hand um the button at the bottom of your screen. It should be there. Anyways, there will also be a lot of fun videos that we will watch. Like videos that will help you learn more about our topic and stuff. And each class will be taking notes, but for this class, for this lesson specifically, we won't be taking that much notes because I have something planned out. Okay, so I just want to go over some little quick classroom rules. And before I go on, does anyone have any questions? Any of the new students have any questions in here? Okay, seems like everyone don't have any questions. So yeah, anyways. Okay. So that's pretty awesome. So I just want to go over some classroom rules for everyone. How long is the meeting? So each class will be about 1 hour. So let's say if you live in the time where it's like 9:30 a.m., it would go on to about 10:30 a.m. So usually that is how long the class starts. Okay, or the class lasts. Okay, so let's talk about some classroom rules before we actually go on to our first lesson today. So, um, today or the chat will always be open at all times, but if you basically misuse the chat, it will result in its removal. So don't do anything that's like spamming, but you could use the chat to ask questions. But I suggest that everyone actually unmute and use their voice to ask questions. But if you don't want to, you can always ask questions in the chat. And please don't talk when the teacher or other classmates are talking, and use the raise hand tool, and I will call on you. So yeah, the raise hand tool, if you guys don't know where it is, it should be at the bottom of your screen. Um, it's somewhere around there, so you can find it. So we will also be having quizzes, right, at the end of the class or at the start, to make sure that you're active in class and also to review what we have learned. And then most importantly is to just have fun and learn in the class. So that's pretty awesome. So it seems like your mic, Emmer's mic doesn't work, so that's okay. You can use the chat or you could maybe rejoin the meeting. Okay. So yeah, with that out of the way, So I just want to explain what we will be doing. So for the first lesson of our class, so I just want to so the first lesson of our class is going to be about ants, or specifically um animals in the Formicidae family. So the reason why I am not starting the actual bio course is because I want to show everyone the my teaching styles to see if you guys would like this teaching style or not, right? Just to like sort of like a sample. And I just want you guys to get basically used to my teaching style um as we progress into our actual lessons. So today we will be starting with ants. Okay, so do we have any questions before we move on for the new students? Any questions before we go on? Okay, seems like today is a very quiet class. All right, so what should you expect in today's lesson? So we will talk about why I chose ants to be our first lesson, right? These cool little fellas, and we'll talk about their behaviors and how ant colony starts. And then we'll also talk about how ants make more colonies, like, like how ants reproduce, how ants basically make more ants. And I will also talk about my ants. And we will also talk about the parts of an ant. So, like, the body parts of an ant. So today's lesson will be very, very chill, very relaxed. So no note taking, and everyone just please pay attention, and you guys will do very good. So I hope everyone learned something in today's first lesson, especially the new students. Okay, so let's talk about why I chose ants for our first lesson for everyone. So the reason why I chose them is because they're actually a lot like us. So ants, they're a lot like us. And the reason why is because they have really complex societies. And what complex societies mean is just that they form like a lot civilizations, right? Like we know that the US or the United States, the country we live in, has a government, right? And the ants sort of have something like that. And they also have labor classes. And if you guys don't know what labor classes is, it basically means just that they have different types of ants that do different types of work. And they also care for each other and their babies, which is what humans do. They also communicate, right? Like what humans do. I am communicating to you right now via Zoom. And every ant gets equal distribution unless, um, oops, sorry, not unless, sorry, there was a grammar mistake. So I meant to say unlike. All right. So every single ant, they get equal distribution, unlike where the human world, some people flourish while others starve. So what this means just means that every single ant, they basically every single ant is equal, right? They get the equal amount of resources, equal amount of food, equal amount of living space, right? But humans are a little bit different. Humans, some of them may be really, really rich, have a lot of resources. Some of them, they might not have a lot of resources, right? So take an example for like the United States, right? We have a lot of resources here, and a lot of people in the United States, they usually don't, you know, they usually aren't hungry. They usually are not poor. But if we look at Africa, for an example, we would see that Africa is a lot more poor than the US, and a lot of people there don't have a lot of food. And the most important thing is that ants, they wage wars, all right? So ants wage wars, humans wage wars. If you guys don't know, humans, they like war a lot. If you guys take example into like Europe, right? We have the war in Ukraine. That's not fun. So yeah, but ants are a lot similar to us. So if you guys actually go out into your backyards or anywhere else outside and observe the ants, you'll realize that ants are kind of like us. And we'll talk more about why ants are similar, or like how ants are similar to us later on in this lesson. Okay, so we got some questions before we move on. Any questions from our fellow new students? Okay, cool. All right. So if you guys have any questions, just remember to always ask freely, but remember to use the raise hand thingy. All right. So our next slide will explain why. sorry, our next slide will ex basically say that they explain biology. Okay, so ants, as we know it, they're living beings, right? And biology is the study of living beings. And we'll talk more about biology as as a whole in maybe the next lesson. All right. So ants they explain biology because they explain the taxonomy system. So this is something if you guys don't know this, if you guys don't know what taxonomy is, that's all right because we will talk about this in another lesson. But basically, in simple terms, taxonomy is just a system, okay? A system that scientists use to define animals. So basically, it's a system where scientists gives animals names and put them into groups of animals into what like the groups of animals, right? We have groups like mammals, like us humans. Humans are a group of animals. Um, ants are a group of animals. Bears, like just any type of animal, any type of living thing has their own taxonomy system. But we'll talk more about that, so don't worry about that right now. So ants, they also have this unique behavior where they form this hive mind, basically meaning that a lot of ants could turn into basically one huge sort of like a brain, right? They make which helps them form complex societies. So this is why ants are so important. They have this like taxonomy system. They explain it really well because there is hundreds of thousands kinds of ants in this world. And they have this cool behavior where they're like bees, right? They basically work together and they sort of form like this hive mind, right? Like a lot of ants aren't like one single ant isn't that great, but a lot of ants form together, right? They're like a really, really cool sort of structure. And ants are social insects, and social insects are kind of unusual. So what are social insects? So the word social basically means that um, they communicate to each other and they basically exchange information to each other, right? Like humans do. Humans are social animals. And basically, ants in the insect world, not a lot of insects are actually social. Not a lot of insects communicate with each other. Not a lot of insects actually, um, talk to each other or like communicate with each other in the long term. So that makes ants really, really special because they sort of just communicate with each other, right? Again, with the hive mind theory, right? Okay, so. We will now talk about their behavior. So do we have any questions or any like stuff that you're not really like comprehending, stuff that you're confused in this lesson? If there's anyone wants to ask a question about that. Okay, great. So it seems like everyone knows the material. All right, so we will talk about first we'll talk about the structure of an ant. So the structure of an ant is actually pretty simple. We got this cool little ant over here. We got this head, the thorax, the abdomen, right? So all of these things, okay, all of these things, they're basically how do I say this? So they're basically the parts of an ant. So we have the head, thorax, and the abdomen, all right? So the head is basically, well, the head of an ant. It is the top part of an ant. And the thorax is basically like its chest, right? Like its back and its chest, and it's in the middle of an ant. And the abdomen is like its belly. So that's basically the part of the ant. It only has three parts. It also has legs and antennas. And these are the parts that they use to basically communicate with each other. Okay, moving on, we also talking about their lifestyle. Or no, sorry, their life cycle. So ants, we all know they start off from eggs, okay? And they come from queens, which is this big ant right here. So if you guys don't know, all ants, every single ant colony, they usually have a queen, right? And the queen is basically the ant that makes the eggs, makes more ants. And the eggs turn into larvae, which is basically these sort of worm-like little creatures. So when the eggs hatch, they don't immediately go into ants, right? They don't immediately become ants like this ant over here. They have to take time. They become larvae. And then they become a pupa, which is this cool little guy. It looks like an ant, but it is actually like more of a shell. The ant's actually inside of the pupa. Okay. So if you guys don't really understand all of this, it's okay because this lesson is just to like basically tell you guys the way that I teach the class. Okay. So when the pupa emerges, it can turn into three types of ants. It could turn into a male ant, a worker, or a queen. And the worker and the queens, they are females. And the reason why they're females is because usually in the ant kingdom, actually that is a really, really complicated topic. It's usually about genetics and stuff, so we won't go that deep. But just know that pupas, right, ants, they could either turn into three types of ants: queens, males, and workers. So that's pretty neat. Okay, so ants, they also form really complex societies, right? Um, their behaviors are really complex, and some behaviors are even unknown to scientists, which is really crazy because such small creatures could basically have such big personalities in them. Essentially, ants, they feed each other, all right? Like we talk about, they care about each other, right? Just like humans, and they feed each other. And they also alert each other when food is nearby. So like basically they tell each other where the food is and all of that stuff. They also collect and store food, right? So that's a very complex behavior because not a lot of insects, not a lot of insects store food. Another thing is that ants, they care for their young. Not a lot of insects actually care for their young. Not a lot of insects actually feed their young, basically meaning that they don't feed their babies. A lot of insects, they basically just lay their eggs and they don't care if their babies actually survive, but ants are different. So I want to show you guys some videos, some cool videos of some complex behaviors of ants basically caring for their babies. So we have this specific one where ants are basically, so here's a larva. He's spinning himself a cocoon. All right. So this is pretty unusual because we can see that this little, I mean, it's just pretty cool, right? We have this cool little larva spinning itself a cocoon, and yeah. So that's the first thing. And as the minutes go by, it will then spin itself this nice little, nice little cocoon, right? So yeah, that's awesome. And here's another video of basically an example of ants caring for their young, right? So I will click on that video for you guys. Okay, so this video is a video of video captured of an ant inside of a cocoon and it's actually emerging. And we have the queen over here and the worker over here helping the ant coming out of its cocoon. So this is pretty neat stuff. And it's also pretty cool to think about that all of these things happen beneath our feet. And usually we can't see them, right? It's all like underground and we can't see this happening, even though it's happening all the time, over millions of times in nature. So yeah, really cool stuff. But this is basically how ants basically care for their brood or care for their babies. Okay, so these are basically some of its really complex behaviors. Now we'll talk about the special engineering of ants, ant nests. So ant nests, they have really, really sophisticated engineering, all right? So imagine an ant nest as like a house with different rooms and chambers, right? We have food storage, like rooms for food storage, which we can see here, right? Ants, they store seeds and stuff. Nurseries, which is where ants um care for their babies, like pupa and larva, all that crazy stuff. We also have the queen's chamber, which is right here. And this is where the queen lays her eggs. All right. So this is the most important part of the ant nest. And usually the queen's chamber is all the way at the bottom to protect her. And ants also have designated bathrooms, right? So where like ants basically go to use the bathroom, specifically the trash room. So this is where ants place their trash. And ants also farm aphids, right? So this is another unusual thing about ants is that they actually farm. They're a lot like humans. They actually make farms, right? So these are basically rooms over here. If you look on the right over here, these are rooms for aphids. So that's pretty cool. Now, there are some other really cool behaviors that not a lot of people know about. And you guys should know about this because ants are pretty awesome. So, um, ants, they have pheromone trails. Okay. So basically what pheromone trails is that um basically ants they secrete this chemical called pheromones. And that's how they let other ants know to walk in this direction. So it's sort of like a highway, right? We can see here in this video, right? It's a little bit blurry, but it's a little bit blurry, so sorry about that. But you guys can see ants down here and ants up here walking along each other. So these guys are actually termites. I'm sorry, those are not ants. These are actually termites, and these are actual ants. And both of these types of animals or insects, they also use pheromones, right? It's sort of like a highway, right? Like a human highway, like this, right? Like how cars move. It's almost like a one-to-one replica of what a highway looks like. So ants are pretty similar to us in the sense that they basically form huge highways. Now, there's another really interesting behavior, right? Another really interesting behavior of an ant. It's called tandem running, all right? So this is when ants go out to forage for food in very, very small groups, usually 2 to 4 ants. And uh, it looks something like this. So this is something that I discovered in my backyard. So I filmed this myself. It's 2 ants walking along each other, and eventually they find this food. These 2 ants, they find food, specifically this dried up piece of mango. So this is all happening in my backyard, and basically we got 2 ants running next to each other, or running, one running in front, running in the back. This is how they discover food. This is how they discover food. Okay, so pretty cool stuff. All right, we have one vocab word in this entire slide, and it's called pheromone. So everyone, remember what pheromone means. It means a chemical signal produced by an animal, and it serves as a signal to communicate with its own species. So it's a lot of words, but don't worry because I am here to break down these words for you guys. So pheromone, a chemical signal, right? So if we just remove the word chemical and just say a pheromone is a signal produced by an animal, right? So basically it says that pheromones is a type of signal, right? Much like how someone sends a text, that's a type of signal. And the pheromone is something like an animal sending a text to one each other or to one another, or an animal also talking to one another. So pheromones, they're a signal produced by an animal. They are secreted by an animal. They are basically made by an animal, and it serves as a signal to communicate with its own species. So a pheromone just helps an animal communicate with its own kind, right? Um, so ants, they secrete this chemical that basically, it's sort of like a perfume, and it basically tells the other ants to do stuff, tell other ants what you should do, and they also tell other ants about things that are happening. All right, any questions before I move on? Okay. So, ants, they also have very interesting behaviors, all right? So, meat ants, for example, I just wanted to talk about meat ants, all right? And another thing is that there's so many different types of ants, but I chose meat ants because they have a really interesting behavior. So, when two different colonies approach, all right? So, this is another thing. Ants, even though they are like the same type of ants, they sometimes, or most of the times, they won't actually get along with each other, and they'll usually fight. However, um, thing is, with most of the ants, they have this pheromone, right? We talked about pheromones, and all of the different types of ant colonies, they have different types of pheromones. And because they have different types of pheromones, that enables ants to basically fight each other because they are different from each other, right? So that's a very interesting behavior in ants. But meat ants do it differently. They don't actually fight to the death. They don't kill each other. They actually sort of have a different way of settling things. So when an ant basically meets each other, right? If you look on the right over here, so when a meat ant approaches a foreign colony, they will actually slap each other until each one of them actually backs off. So in this video, I will show you guys basically what happens. So you guys can see here they're basically sort of like slapping each other with their front legs. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty awesome. Okay, so we will now move on to the next slide. Any questions about regarding this topic? Any questions? Okay, so we will move on. All right, so how does a colony start and how does it end? So we all know that everything has a start and an end, right? Not everything lives forever, not even the universe, right? You know that the universe is ginormous, it's huge. It has so many things, so many stars in it. But even then, the universe wouldn't even last forever. Everything has a start, everything has an end, and that's usually the way of life. And we can see here that, oh, what's this? An alien. So what is an alien? And an alien is basically an ant that is basically like a starting queen, right? It's basically think of it as like a prince or a princess in like a kingdom, right? And if you guys may or may not notice, but ants, they make more colonies by having nuptial flights. So ants, they can actually fly. And it's basically where future queens, they fly up into the air and they basically mate with male ants, right? So we can see here these two, there's a queen over here and a male over here. So they basically mate, and basically after that, the male dies, and then after that, the queen basically digs a colony, digs itself underground, and basically you know um it's sort of just like this is just how like everything works, right? Nuptial flights with like the alates, right? So yeah, ants have wings, if you guys didn't know that. And the male ants, they usually have a smaller head, right? They kind of look like wasps. And the queens, they have like a bigger thorax and head, and they have also a bigger abdomen as well. Okay, so and the Ethan, I see that you have to leave, and that's okay. So yeah, I'll see you in the next lesson. Okay, anyways, so yeah, these are basically just basic things about how ant colonies start. All right, do we have any other questions before we move on to the next topic? Okay, so these are some nuptial flights that I captured. So this was in my backyard about a year ago. And we can see here how they're basically, so these are all exclusively male ants, right? With you can see them with wings, some worker ants, right? It's pretty awesome. So yeah, that's nuptial flights. And really it's pretty awesome. So yeah. Okay, so after the queen is done mating, she digs herself a founding chamber where she basically stays there for the rest of her life to basically make babies. So this is a Lasius emerginatus queen, basically like a black garden ant queen, and she herself has this little batch of babies over here, right? Pretty cool. Okay, and here is a video of basically a queen ant, specifically a harvester ant, digging herself a little founding chamber. So we can see here. Pretty cool, right? It's like digging up the dirt. You can see here a piece of dirt. Pretty smart animals. All right. But of course, there's different types of queens. So there are claustral queens and semi-claustral queens. So even in the entire grand scheme of things, there are different types of queens. So let's first talk about the claustral queens. So claustral queens, they actually do not go out to find food for their babies. So if you guys didn't know, most queens, they don't go out to find food for their babies. They use broken down wing muscles from their nuptial flights, right? Ants, they basically fly, and they use that muscle in their wings as like sort of like a nutritious soup to feed her babies. So that's basically how queen ants work, right? They don't go out to find food, and their wings, they also rip them off. And after they rip them off, they basically go into they basically lay a bunch of eggs, and that's how they feed their eggs. They feed their eggs by using their wing muscles. And it's not to be confused with their actual wings. They don't feed their actual wings to their babies. They feed the wing muscles, right? Muscles inside of their bodies. They basically liquefy, they basically digest their muscles and then feed it to their babies. So they're pretty hardworking moms. And there's also semi-claustral queens. Semi-claustral queens goes out to forage food to feed her babies. And because they lack the protein reserves, right? They lack the wing muscles inside inside of their bodies. So they have evolved to be semi-claustral, so they go out to find food. And usually this is very dangerous for the ant because that means that they have to go out to face predators and stuff. So yeah, there's always a pro and con for both of these. Okay, and after a month or so, the first workers emerge, and they're called nanitics. Nanitics are the first workers, the first generation of workers, and they're usually smaller than the future generations, as you can see on the right picture. We can see a nanitic from 4 months before the colony actually became really huge, right? You can see this is a nanitic, a really small worker, and this is a regular size worker, right? We can see here. So that's pretty awesome. Okay, so we can see here also a young Camponotus pennsylvanicus colony. This is not my ant, but this is because this is a type of ant in Pennsylvania in the eastern United States. So if any of you guys live in the eastern US, you guys will find this type of ant. So yeah, pretty cool. So do we have any more questions? Okay, so just to review, ants, right? Nanitics, first workers, they're usually smaller. And as the months goes by, when more workers emerge, they actually get way bigger. Like this one over here. Did you guys see how big this ant is compared to this one at the top over here? So that's pretty awesome. We also have this side of sort of size difference. We have a bigger ant over here and a smaller ant over here. So yeah, these are just the nitics versus normal workers. And sometimes ants, or most of the times ants, they could basically grow into big colonies. And usually around 1 to 10 years, colonies could reach the thousands or even millions, and it depends on the species. For example, we have a wood ant colony here, right? This entire spot in the forest is a wood ant colony. So wood ants are these cool little ants, basically Formica rufa. So these ants, they actually shoot acid they shoot acid like this, right? So if you actually go into one of these, like basically go near one of these colonies, this huge colony over here, they will shoot acid at you like this. And usually their acid don't hurt you. And here's a photo of a person with his hands out, and you can see a bunch of acids spraying at him. So yeah, this is pretty neat. We also have smaller colonies which only goes to the maximum of thousands. For example, a carpenter ant colony. This specific carpenter ant is also a Camponotus pennsylvanicus colony. You know, a Pennsylvania carpenter ant, a black carpenter ant in the eastern United States. And they usually have smaller amount of colonies, smaller amount of numbers of ants. You can see here there's only probably like a few hundred, and usually they can go about 10 to 15,000 ants, which isn't a lot because most ant species they could go into millions of ants. And just to put that into perspective, a million is so large that the human brain cannot imagine a million things. Like, sure, you can imagine like $1 million, but you can't imagine a million things like in real life. It's just too big. You could probably imagine like a few hundred or a few thousand, but a million is just so big that you can't imagine it. So is a billion, but we'll talk more about numbers in the future because numbers are a pretty big thing in like biology. Eventually, ant colonies they actually end, right? Eventually, a queen gets old and she can't produce enough eggs to support the declining population. And as a result, the colony either dies out or it gets taken over by other ants. So we have a video right here of an ant being killed. So it would look somewhat like this in the wild. And basically, this is actually the largest ant in the world right here. It is called the Dinomyrmex. I forgot what its full name was, but it's basically the largest ant in the world, and its scientific name is Dinomyrmex gigas. So that is the largest ant in the world, and it only exists in the Philippines. So you guys won't find it in the United States. So that's kind of sad. I kind of wish that we had this big ant. Okay, so let's watch this video of basically ants fighting and like how ants actually die to other ants. So yeah, that's basically how ants fight to the death. Sometimes they use acid, sometimes they just use um a lot of ants to fight one enemy. So size doesn't matter in the ant kingdom, or it does actually doesn't matter anyway. So quantity always proves um quantity always proves stronger than quality sometimes, right? You can see in this example, so many smaller ants overwhelmed a bigger enemy. So yeah, this is how basically an ant gets taken out, or a colony in a much larger scale, like a colony get taken over. Okay, so now welcome to the end of the lesson. So usually at the end of the lesson we'll review what we learned, but right now we'll actually talk about my ants. So you guys can also ask some question about my ants too, but here's an ant that I had 2 years ago, and so this one actually died about a year ago, but these are like the pictures I have of them before when they were alive. You can see here that this is called a Solenopsis cylone, or fire ant, and it's actually a black fire ant, so it's a Arizona variant. And basically, you have these guys over here. This was in 2022. You can see how there's uh, a very small amount of ants, and about a year later, they got so much bigger, right? And here's basically them on an earlier time when they're moving their babies. So yeah, this was basically like a very, very long time ago. So these are my cool little Arizona Arizona fire ants. Also have more pictures of them, and this is them in 2024. So their numbers actually decreased because there was a food shortage for them. I forgot to feed them for a long time, but they still recovered because look, they have so much eggs now. So yeah, this was 2024, last year of April. So this is pretty neat. I also have another colony, this Camponotus vicinus. So this colony, it also unfortunately is gone. I sort of sold it, I guess last year, gave it to a friend, and basically this is the queen ant. Looks pretty beautiful, right? And this is its little babies. And also, these are not the pictures I took; these are the pictures online. But the queen looks something like this. So yeah, I have some videos of them, and this is basically the queen. When I first got her, you can see the queen and her small amount of brood. And these babies actually became this ant right here. So that baby you saw in the video became this cool little ant. So isn't this awesome how like basically one single queen could actually become so many different could basically produce so many babies like this, right? So that's just the beauty of life and all that stuff. I also have Camponotus CaO2, which is giant California carpenter. It is actually the largest ant species in the United States. So here's my Camponotus CaO2 and my Camponotus vicinus for scale. You can see how the Camponotus CaO2 is a little bit larger than the vicinus. That's because vicinus is actually mostly from Northern California. You won't really see it in Southern California that much, but CaO2 is still the largest ant in the USA. So this is the largest ant that you will find. Now you would notice that why is its name CaO2? The reason why its name is CaO2 is because it actually doesn't have a name yet. Scientists actually haven't found a name for them. So that's the neat part about them. So I also have a video of a CaO2 queen actually opening one of its cocoons. So you can see here, right? Pretty awesome. So this is my queen ant. And she basically did this. That's pretty awesome. All right. So, um, we also have a size comparison, right? It's the size of them compared to my finger. So you can see how they're actually pretty big. But this queen specifically, this colony isn't actually the biggest. The queen could be much bigger than just this, right? So size, sometimes the size varies. And here we are with the more pictures of them. All right, and another ant that oh yeah, here's also them eating some food from an insect. So yeah, these are pretty cool stuff, but I also have another colony that I had about 3 years ago, and basically they're called the Camponotus, or no, sorry, Phaedoli bicarinata, or big-headed ants. So they kind of look like this, right? They have really big heads, but the colonies themselves are pretty small. They're about half a millimeter, which is really, really small compared to my CaO2. So these are pretty cool. This little guys over here, they sort of form like a small wall over here, which I thought it was pretty neat. So this one actually also died too. Smaller ants are generally harder to keep because they sometimes could either drown themselves in the cotton over here, right? So yeah, but anyways, so I still have a CaO2 and another queen, Formica frusca, which is a type of black ant, but I'll show you guys in the next lesson because we are running out of time. So we will talk about one more slide. And this is the Pogonomyrix californicus. It is the California harvester ant. You will only find this type of ant in California. And this queen is a semi-claustral queen, which means that she actually goes out of her claustral of her chamber, of her like nest to forage food for her babies. So yeah, I also have a Solenopsis invicta queen, and this is the clearest photo I have taken in a long time. This is, I thought, maybe the best photo I've taken for in a long time. So this is the infamous red imported fire ant. So these guys does a lot of harm onto the ecosystems of California and Texas, just most of the southern United States. And this is really, really bad for the environment. But these guys are pretty cool because they actually could grow to thousands of ants in less than 3 months, right? 3 months is a very short amount of time, and they could already reach thousands, if not millions of ants in a year. So compared to my CaO2, which could only reach 100 ants in about 1 or 2 years, which is a really long time, these guys just absolutely go crazy on making babies. You can see here they already have a lot of eggs, and it's only their second day. And that's crazy. Okay, and I also do a lot of photography. Just another thing that you guys don't know about myself. I also do a lot of macro photography, photography of like smaller worlds. So this is a little sharpshooter bug that I took on a leaf. It kind of looks like a frog. And this little butterfly, this little Western gray butterfly. I actually forgot its name, but it's a pretty cool butterfly. And this little pill bug, and my ants feeding each other. So this is how ants feed each other, right? Pretty neat. So this is the camera I used. It's a macro lens. You actually attach the camera to your phone. Anyways, so yeah, thank you guys for coming to ask. And if there's any students who have questions or if your parents actually have any questions, please unmute and ask right now. And if you guys don't have any questions, you guys may leave. So yeah, thank you guys for coming to today's class. And I hope that next week, Saturday, you guys can also come to class next week. And next week we'll actually start our official biology course. So yeah, thank you guys for coming. If you guys have any questions, please unmute and ask. So if you guys don't have any questions, you guys may leave. Thank you guys for coming to class.